I've spent the last 20 years in law enforcement. 17 of those years I have been a patrol officer. So that means I work, the road and I respond to calls. A lot of my job, the first 13 years, is when family members are concerned about a loved one and think that they need a mental health checkup or an evaluation. They go to the courthouse and they'll petition a judge to say, these are the reasons. They tell the judge, these are the reasons they think my family member needs to go to a mental health hospital. They need to be evaluated, and they need to be evaluated now. So I would get those after a doctor signed off on them, or after the judge signed off on them. I would get those petitions, and I would go to their loved one's house to let them know that, yeah, the judge agreed with your family. You need to go to a mental health hospital. And most of the time when I come to the door and explain that that's why I'm there, they were not happy. They were not thrilled that their family member just went to the judge and said that they're struggling. So you learn really, really quick early on in my career how to de-escalate situations. It's no secret that law enforcement has really had some struggles with some use of force situations. For years, since the inception of law enforcement. One of the interesting statistics is use of force incidents actually go down with more females that you have in your department. I'd like to say, because I'm a female and I'm a little bit smaller, I'm not, the biggest and baddest person in the room, learning those de-escalation strategies were very important to me in my career. Throughout my career, I've made hundreds of arrests. And again, those aren't typically situations where people are happy to see you and, they're not in a good mood when you tell them, well, you have to go to jail. So learning how to de-escalate people, it saved my life. Literally could save my life. So knowing these skills are vital for my job. I also am a member of our crisis intervention team, which means that I've had special training to talk to people when they're in crisis. I've been a self-defense instructor for the past 19 years of my career. And I've been working with our project here for just about 2 years. Janet, I see we have 2 people in the waiting room. Do you see them, or do I need to let them in?
I don't see them, so I guess I don't have that option. Sorry.
I will let them in.
Thank you.
I got them. Okay. All right. So that's a little bit about me and why I think learning tactics of de-escalation are so important. They, like I said, they've helped me through my whole 20 years in law enforcement. Oh, I'm sorry. I got one more person to let in. There we go.
Autumn, you can make me the co-host and I could do it. I think if I'm the co-host.
I think we're good. All right. So what we're going to be talking about today is our behavioral influence stairway model. So if you look at our model on our screen, we're going to start at the very bottom. We're actually going to start before the very first rung of introduction. The first thing that we know, especially through our mental health first aid training, is the first thing that we need to do is assess the situation. When we're assessing the situation, we need to decide, can I connect with this person? I think the particular participant in my class who really had some questions about this topic, she was trying to ask me how to de-escalate somebody that she couldn't even connect with. So in our assessment, we need to be able to determine, is the person that I'm trying to help You know, are their thoughts logical and rational? You know, that will change our tactics if we determine that their thoughts aren't logical and rational at the time. You know, and what we call that is contaminated thinking. Contaminating thinking, here's our definition of that. It's just when someone's thought process is, you know, they aren't having clear thoughts. You know, it might be a temporary issue, it might be a permanent issue. You know, they aren't logically understanding, or you're not relating to their environment appropriately. So, you know, from the very get-go, we're assessing, is their thinking clear or is it contaminated? Feel free to unmute yourself. I'll ask some questions. Anyone wants to chime in. You know, why might somebody's thinking be contaminated? Anyone have ideas?
I would assume drug use.
Mm-hmm. Drug and alcohol use, absolutely. Sometimes it's, you know, there are mental health reasons why, you know, their brain just isn't responding in a rational thought, you know, organized pattern. So a video for you. Now, if you are assessing this man, just give me some thoughts. How do you think that this would go?
One thing.
So that was a quick video. How do you think that assessment would go if you wanted to come in and say, hey, you know, it seems like you might be having some struggles. I'd like to help you. How do you think that's going to go? Do you think he's in a place to connect right then? No. So what we need to remember is our goals of contact with somebody is we want to have some sort of intervention. In our intervention, we're trying to influence a behavioral change. You know, for me, when I was intervening with somebody, you know, whether it's on patrol or I'm going to their house because I have this paperwork that says I have to take them to the hospital, you know, my goal is to get whatever is going on right then to have their behavior change. So then they willingly want to go with me to the hospital. I mean, I never show up and say, oh, I want to take somebody by force. That's never the goal. You know, I always want that behavior change. But sometimes when I showed up, you know, we weren't even in a place. They were not in a place for me to affect that behavioral change because I just couldn't connect with them. They didn't have the availability to connect. So in that situation, let's fall back on our training. You know, you can't connect with them. What are some goals that we have? You know, you're not a police officer, you're a mental health first aider. What are your goals right then when you're not able to connect with somebody?
To keep yourself safe, to keep others safe, and to keep them safe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, our number one priority is making sure that we're safe. And then surrounding people, you know, if there are other family members around or coworkers around to kind of evacuate the area, you know, gain some distance, stand back, you know, so you can call in professionals to come in and assist. So let's say we can connect, you know, so I could connect with somebody. I show up at their house or at their workplace to say, you know, you're going to have to come with me. You know, it's the same principles that we teach law enforcement officers that we teach in our mental health first aid class. I introduce myself, you know, I'd say, hi, you know, my name is Autumn. I would always introduce instead of, hi, my name is Lieutenant Ruehl. You know, I didn't go that route. You know, I would use my first name to kind of make it more personable. Hey, my name is Autumn. You know, in our role as a mental health first aider, you might want to mention, you know, I did some mental health first aid training. You know, you may or may not want to use that. You kind of need to assess at that time. I'm here to help you. What are some other tips from our training that they suggest? Does anyone remember?
Say approaching in a low tone manner.
Absolutely. Yeah. Tone of voice. Anyone else remember anything?
Kind of clear, simple directions.
Mm-hmm.
Not fidgeting or moving your hands erratically to kind of get them like jumpy.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Are same things that our training teaches us. You know, trying to be calm, trying to be predictable in your behavior as you're engaging. I like to give options when possible. You know, I would say, hey, in the example that I had to take them somewhere, I'd say, you know, would you like me to take you, or would you like for me to call an ambulance and I'll have an ambulance? You know, because some people don't want to be in the back of a police car. I would say, hey, would you like me to call an ambulance for you and you can go in the back of an ambulance? Or, you know, if you're worried about calling too much attention to your house, we can just use my car. You know, offering options. Would you like to stand up and talk to me? Would you like to have a seat? That way, somebody who feels like control is getting ready to be taken away from them, but giving them a sense of having some control of the situation. You know, would you like to go in the other room and talk, you know, so we can talk in more privacy, or are you okay with your family being here? Those options are really good. Really giving people a sense of having some control. So we're on that bottom rung of our behavioral staircase with our introduction. Okay, so our next step.
Autumn, I think that was really good about the family when you mentioned the family, because sometimes just asking, is there someone else that can be beneficial or that's helped in the past that you would mind or rather be here with us? Maybe they don't want to be with you alone. And so maybe there's that other person that can actually help in creating a calmer space for them.
Absolutely.
Especially if they don't know you. So asking that question, I think, was really good. Is there a person that has been beneficial in the past, or that you would rather be here, or be here, you know, along with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What resources will make you feel more comfortable? Obviously, if it's in our control to do, we want to use those resources.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So our next step is building that empathy. You know, we know to connect with somebody, they're going to need to know that we have some empathy for them. I'll use examples of responding to domestic violence calls. I know from my training that domestic violence calls are the most dangerous calls officers can take. You know, those are the calls where most officers, you know, in line of duty deaths happen when responding to domestic calls. So of course, when I'm responding to these calls, you know, I'm playing it out in my head, you know, how am I going to approach the situation? You really want to de-escalate that situation as quickly as you can, because it's a high emotion situation when you get there. You know, often I'll respond and there'll have been some abuse that occurred before I got there. You know, I usually try to find the person who has the hottest temper, you know, the perpetrator, and engage with them first. You know, I need to make sure that my victim is getting their medical needs taken care of, but I need to engage and take the heat out of the situation as quick as I can. You know, I'll start with, you know, can you tell me what's going on? What had happened? You know, and a lot of times the perpetrator is telling me, you know, you don't understand, and they're yelling at me, they're, you know, screaming at me, telling me I don't understand, and I'm like, well, try to help me understand. You know, oh, I understand where that would be really frustrating. You worked all day and you came home and the house was a mess. You know, the kids weren't listening, you know, your children weren't listening to you. I understand where that would be very frustrating, you know, trying to build that connection. They might have just beat the tar out of their family member, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, you jerk, but I surely don't come across that way. I try to stay out of that judgment, like, oh, you should not have done that, even though I know, and we know that's wrong and someone's going to jail, I don't want to fight. So I try to say, yeah, I understand why you would be so angry. Trying to recognize those emotions, what happened before I got here. Really communicating that you understand other people's emotions. You might not agree with what they did, and often I did not agree, with the behavior that came out of those emotions, but trying to bring down the heat in the room, I try to say, well, I understand why you would have been angry, or that really would have been upsetting. Building rapport is our next step. So we built that empathy, authenticity, and I think a lot of times to show that you're authentic in your reaction and trying to take the heat out of the room, that takes time. I'll say a lot of my coworkers, if I happen to watch the way that they're responding to a particular situation, they're trying to just rush through it and go to the next thing. Well, people see that. If our role as a mental health first aider, we're just trying to stabilize a situation that we walked into and we're rushing through it and we want to go do our next thing, you're not going to be able to build rapport that way. People need the time. They want to be heard, and being heard takes time. Have you ever had a conversation with somebody, maybe it's your boss or a coworker, and you're coming to them with an issue that you're struggling with, and they don't listen to you, or they're rushing out of the room, or they're checking their email, or it doesn't make you feel very heard. So taking your time with these situations when you come across somebody who needs to be de-escalated, slow things down, share similarities. A lot of times when I respond to somebody's house or, trying to de-escalate a situation, I might look around, or I might observe, let's say they have a Bengals sweatshirt on. Hey, you like the Bengals? How about that game this weekend? What happened? I like the Bengals too. Or, hey, your flower garden's beautiful. I like to garden. Trying to show some similarity. Or, let's say it's a parent who's really struggling with a child. I'll share, well, I'm a parent too, and I understand children can be so frustrating. It's not like they have an owner's manual and we're supposed to just know how to handle every situation. Trying to build that common ground with somebody. And shared experiences. Yeah, I haven't had a teenager yet, but if those of you who've had teenagers, when you're talking to someone else with a teenager, say, yeah, those teenage years were hard. It's tough to get through it. Really sharing that with somebody, building that rapport. And like we know through our training, active listening is vital. People sometimes just really wanted to be heard. And after they are able to share their story, that and just being heard can take the temperature out of the room. People want to be validated. I try really hard to help people come to the conclusion for some of their own solutions. After talking with them for a while, I'll get people to admit, well, yeah, I have been struggling lately. I haven't been sleeping. You're right, I haven't been eating. I should go see a mental health professional. Having them come to that conclusion themselves. And we use this a lot with domestics. Sometimes we take a lot of domestic calls that are just, verbal altercations between partners. And when we respond, I know going into it, there's nothing legally that I'm going to do. There's nothing there. No one has been physically hurt. But I'm going to leave that situation. What can I do to leave that situation better than it was when I got there? And getting people to agree, hey, yeah, maybe I need to go to my friend's house for the night. Or, maybe I need to remove myself from the situation. Getting other people on board with coming up with that conclusion instead of me having to tell them, you need to leave for the night, because legally I can't really force somebody to leave. And it's always better if people come to that conclusion on their own than me telling them they have to. And these are some of our examples of showing that we're actively listening. A side note, I think it's funny. I'm currently in a master's program with social work, and these same ones were in my my training for my social work program. Asking open-ending questions when you're talking to somebody. Well, tell me, how did that make you feel? So people have time to talk about how they're feeling. If someone's speaking to you, reflect back what they're saying so that they know that you're listening. Hey, that sounds like you're very angry, or that sounds like that made you very sad. That emotional labeling. Paraphrasing, repeating back to them what they said. And if something you're not sure, asking clarifying questions, then they know
Got
you're
it.
tracking. Yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Ami Jaga. May I help you?
I don't know. Let's see. Can I turn? Oh, there we go. And remember to withholding that judgment. For me, some of the particular things that I've been involved with, I know, in my head, I'm like, well, that is clearly wrong. But I don't convey that when I'm doing my job, because then it becomes adversarial. So staying out of that judgment. Okay, so our top rung is our influence. What we want to do when we're having to de-escalate, let's say it's a coworker or a family member who is just, high temperature. What we want to do is to get them to influence them for behavioral change. So while I'm doing this, I want to be assessing the whole time during my interaction. Am I connecting? Is what I'm trying to do working? Do I see that I'm making an influence to ultimately work towards that behavioral change? And I'll tell you, there are some calls that I've been on. There's a particular family that had a lot of mental health struggles that I responded to their house quite frequently. And one of the men there, for some reason, just did not like me. He did not like when I was there. He made up in his mind that he just wasn't going to hear me, and when I would hear that address come out and they, would send me there, I would ask for another officer to respond, because I knew I wasn't the person who was going to be able to connect. And sometimes, like for me, you have to let your pride go and say, I'm not the best person for this person. And there are other times that, I would be on a call and I'm with a coworker and I see that I'm not connecting and it's not going anywhere. My interventions aren't going anywhere. So then maybe reevaluating and stepping back and letting someone else step in and take over that call. Because for some reason, I was having a hard time. I remember some years ago, I went and responded to a call for a suicidal teenager. She was 15. She was living with her father. The situation wasn't great. She didn't have a lot of friends at school. It was me and another female officer went to the call. And for some reason, that call gave me a hard time. Because I felt like I was always the one who liked to put a silver lining on things. And when I got to that call, I couldn't see the silver lining. And I really struggled on that call. And the officer I was a senior officer, and she stepped in and right away could connect with this teenager better than I could at the time. And it was a learning lesson for me, to be honest. I left that call thinking, wow, I don't know it all. You know, I can't connect with everyone. You know, I need to do better with these skills. You know, I need to learn some better skills on how to handle a call like that. So for us as mental health first aiders, it's really knowing ourselves and knowing the areas we're good at and the areas we're just not good at. I will say teenagers give me a hard time. Those calls are particularly hard for me to engage as well. Maybe I'll get better the older my kids get, but those are calls that do give me a struggle. So our end goal, like I said, is behavioral change. What kind of behavior were we looking for? Were we looking for the person to calm down? Let's say it's your coworker at work who's just upset and mad about a particular situation that just happened with their supervisor. You know, what was our goal? Was our goal to get somebody to calm down? Okay. Was it to get somebody who seemed to be in a mental health crisis to agree to go to the hospital? And sometimes our goal is to get someone to remove themselves from the situation. Like I said, when it's a domestic fight or, you know, a verbal argument, if I could get somebody just to agree that they're going to leave, you know, that was the win. You know, they're going to have to follow up with therapy and counseling and all that. Right then and there, my win is just to get them to leave the situation. You know, so trying to assess what is our goal, what is the behavior change we were hoping to influence through this interaction. So that is my PowerPoint that I have. I have some questions in the chat. Does anybody have any questions for me?
No question right now, but I do want to say thank you so much for that. I think that was so helpful, you know, helpful to have additional information to share with the learners as we're teaching them, because oftentimes, you know, you're exactly right. They will come to us and ask us for additional support and additional, you know, approaches to use. So I think this was very helpful, and I appreciate so much you sharing that with us.
I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you recommend the professional help and they don't want to take it?
So it's frustrating, you know, because we all went, at the end of the day, everyone on this call I know is on this call because you care and you want people's lives to be better. Sometimes we go to the same house or interact with the same person numerous times before they finally get some help, you know, and sometimes I've been here long enough that I'll interact with somebody for a while. They'll get some help and be doing great for a long time. And then there's a relapse, you know, and then we start the cycle again. So recovery isn't a straight line. So I just, you know, I keep offering that resource, you know, and one day I hope that it clicks, you know, and just knowing that it's not a straight line. There's a lot of ups and downs in recovery, whether, you know, it's mental health struggles or addiction. Yeah. And if it's a family member, it can be particularly frustrating because you really want them to get the help, right? So I think it's doing the self-care things for yourself because your feelings are hurt and you're frustrated. You know, to remember, I'm not the one who's in control, you know. They need to come to it on their own, and you know, having a good support system is good too, to go share disappointment and mourning that their loved one's not getting the help they need.
And I think too, to add to that, you know, Autumn and to Tyria, you know, to what you're saying too, you know, there are times that, again, I mean, as we all know, when somebody is a threat to themselves or others in those situations, there are times when, it is in their best interest, although it doesn't feel like it at the time, and it doesn't look like it at the time to their family watching, that they do need to be taken in against their will.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's what it looks, sometimes that is what happens, but it's for the purpose of, it is because they are in some way a threat to themselves or others. And in that case, at times it does escalate to needing physical restraints or physical transport. Though, certainly, but that's, I think like Autumn said, that's always kind of like the last resort. That's the last resort. Using the de-escalation strategies is always, that's the first approach. And then kind of moving through those next stages as you have to.
I'll tell you, when I go on calls like this, I would rather take the officer with me that I know is an amazing, just talking to people, than the strongest, biggest guy on the force.
Mhm.
Because I would rather get somebody to agree to come than have to force them to come. Now I've been in situations where we had to force people to come, but that's not really a win for anyone. I didn't leave that feeling great. And those are rough. Those are really rough. And that's where people get hurt. And none of us want that.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes that our feelings will get in the way of making the best choice for them. Remembering again, it's about them. It's about their well-being. It's about the safety of everybody else, even again, if they're causing harm to themselves or even to others. And I think that we have to really work hard at not getting our emotions in the way, because it may cause us not to make those the best choices or the best choices at that time. And so I think that hearing that sometimes, I think we know it. How you know something, but then hearing it just kind of makes it that much more impactful, I guess. Because that, and I think what we still want to do is we either want to fix it, which that's not our goal, or we want to at least make it better. But I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that I would much rather. I've had some participants that would say, they would much rather not call or not have them go for the sake of saving a relationship. And my thing is, I would much rather them either be mad at me or we not ever have a relationship even after that, if it's for their betterment. And so I think sometimes we need to just continue to hear that it's still, again, not about us and about the relationship that we would probably want to continue, but it's about them and their betterment.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
their well-being. Yeah, their well-being.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, go ahead, Autumn. Sorry, go ahead.
That is incredible. You're absolutely right, but that is so incredibly hard. It is so hard to do. It is the right thing to do, and I've been in this situation professionally. And then when I'm off duty and having to take someone to the hospital, it's tough, but it is an absolute necessity. We want them alive. We want people safe.
One of the things that I tell people during my training in the suicide section is, again, because the conversation does come up, what if I'm stepping on toes? What if I make somebody mad? What if somebody gets upset with me? And I say, I have to make that decision. I personally always err on the side of caution. I have to be able to put my head on the pillow at night. I can repair I have the opportunity to repair relationships. I don't have the opportunity for the alternative.
Exactly.
So that's kind of when I do my trainings, that's how I present it. One of the other things I want to kind of point out too that I share in the trainings is one of the resources that we have in our resource list. And I always like to encourage the learners to kind of hone in on this. And it's that nonviolent crisis intervention training, or NVCI, through the Crisis Prevention Institute. Again, it's in our list, it's in there, but it's a training, and it's specific to how to safely keep yourself safe, but also not hurt the other person. It's specific to, keeping, probably many of you have probably even taken the training. I'm sure Autumn has taken it or something very similar, but it's nonviolent crisis intervention training. It's something that anybody can take. It's how do we protect ourselves, but also not hurt the other person. So if somebody puts you in a chokehold, if somebody puts you in, if somebody's pulling your hair, it's a little different than self-defense, because my focus is how do I then not hurt the person? So I always tell family, people in my class, if you've got somebody in your family that regularly experiences, disruptive behaviors, this is a great reason. That's a great training to take. It's something separate than ours, but it's way more in depth. But it's a great one that I've taken. I mean, I have to take it for, I've taken it for my job over the years. I think it's a great one. Do you take, Autumn, what is your,
Absolutely.
have
Absolutely.
you taken that actual course then, or?
Yeah, we have something similar through our academy. And now, if I particularly know, we have one man that we frequently deal with. He is 6'8". He weighs 400 pounds. His mom is actually, she goes around and gives trainings to all the local law enforcement departments around here, and kind of tells us about her son. And it'll break your heart. I can't listen to her without crying. It makes me so sad, because I know her son and I know he gets violent. And when I get a call and I know that I have to go pick him up, my heart does start, oh no. In those cases, I don't go with just one other officer. There's a few of us, because we don't want to hurt him. And I know if he hit me one time, he could kill me with one hit. He's incredibly strong, and that is always helpful too. You might not always have that luxury to have other people around you who can help with the situation if you had to go more with a restraining, but having more resources around if somebody is very violent. Of course, my first suggestion is you could back out, because we don't want anyone to get hurt. Truly, we don't want anyone to get hurt. But yeah, we have training like that.
I think that's a good one, because I think realistically, there are some people who take our class that realistically they are faced with this, they are faced with those different situations where, disruptive behavior is a reality for them. So it's a great tool to be able to share.
Yeah, this particular gentleman, when I knew that I had to go pick him up, I know that he loved Coke. He loves a Coca-Cola, and he likes to smoke. And generally, he knows he's going to the hospital and they're not going to let him smoke. You bet I would go buy a pack of cigarettes and a Coke and be like, hey, I'll let you have this Coke, and I'll even let you smoke in the car. It took the temperature down, and he was much more compliant. I would stop on the way before I got to the house.
I think that's one of those other things that I've learned too, again, the hard way, very quickly again. And as a nurse, it was always kind of ironic, but I would comply with reasonable request. That's one of those statements that I share in my trainings when I do the mental health first aid trainings. But as a nurse, very oftentimes, a reasonable request is, I need to go smoke right now. All right, cool. Let's go outside. We're gonna go smoke. We'll have a conversation, 5 weeks from now about smoking cessation. Today, right now, if this is to de-escalate the situation, go have a smoke. That's going to make life so much easier for so much calmer for everybody. We're doing that. So again, that's you comply with reasonable requests if you can do that. And that's a great tool. That's a great intervention we can pass on to our learners to let them know something else that can work. So.
Also, I believe that it falls into harm reduction. Come on now.
Absolutely.
I don't want to smoke, but I shouldn't limit you, and then I could de-escalate a situation. When someone smokes, they feel relaxed per se. So
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it works. It works. For sure.
Yeah. I've even been now thinking about different types of music that's subliminal, kind of like what they do in the grocery stores when you're shopping. There's certain music that plays that make you shop. Or you go in the casino, there's music that plays that make you spend. There is music that you can choose if you have an opportunity to have music playing, but even just the sounds that are going on, background sounds and all that can make a difference. even in helping to de-escalate a situation.
Mhm.
I just put that link for that NVCI too in the.
Thank you, Bridget. I was going to ask you that. I was just going to type that.
Yes, yep.
And I can send you the PowerPoint, Bridget, if anyone wanted a copy of the PowerPoint.
Thank you. Yeah, because there were several questions regarding that. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Much appreciated.
But yeah, if anyone has any more questions, I thank you very much for attending today. I appreciate it. And if anything comes up, yeah, my email's at the end of the PowerPoint. If you have any questions, I mean, if there's a question that you didn't feel comfortable saying out loud or a question you always wanted to ask an officer, I can answer. I'm happy to help.
Thank you so much. This was very helpful and much appreciated.